The Forbidden Touch. The corridor lights of Research Station Helios 9 pulsed with their usual amber rhythm as Dr. Marcus Webb navigated the cramped passage toward the xenobiology lab. His arms were full of specimen containers, his attention divided between the delicate cargo and the datapad balanced precariously on top. He'd been on the station for only 3 weeks, still learning its maze-like layout, still adjusting to the constant hum of machinery and the peculiar scent of recycled air mixed with alien biochemistry. He turned the corner and collided with something solid. The containers went flying. Marcus lunged forward, catching 2 before they hit the floor, but the third bounced off someone, and clattered against the wall. He looked up to find himself face to face with Lieutenant Kyra Thess, the station's chief security officer. She stood rigid, her violet-tinged skin flushed darker with what Marcus could only interpret as anger. Her silver eyes narrowed as she stepped back, putting deliberate distance between them. "Watch where you're going, human. These passages aren't your personal laboratory." "I'm sorry, I didn't," Marcus began, but she was already moving past him, her footsteps precise and purposeful. He watched her disappear around the corner, noting the tight set of her shoulders beneath her uniform, the way she'd flinched when they'd made contact. It wasn't the first time he'd seen her, but it was their first direct interaction. Her reputation preceded her, strict, unyielding, with zero tolerance for protocol violations. The other researchers gave her a wide berth. Marcus gathered his containers and continued to his lab, but the encounter lingered in his mind. There had been something in her eyes beyond anger, a flash of something else he couldn't quite name. The rest of his day passed in familiar routine, cataloging samples, running genetic analyses on the strange flora collected from the nearby moon. The work absorbed him completely until his lab door chimed, announcing a visitor. Kyra stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Webb," she said formally, "I need to inspect your specimen containment protocols. There's been a security concern raised about cross-contamination risks." I straightened, surprised. "I wasn't informed of any inspection schedule." "It's unscheduled." She entered without waiting for permission, her movements economical and purposeful. "Show me your containment procedures." I led her to the name workstation, acutely aware of her presence beside him. She stood closer than necessary as he demonstrated the quarantine systems, her attention seemingly fixed on the displays, but Marcus could feel her gaze occasionally shifting to him, lingering just a moment too long. "This interface requires biometric confirmation," he explained, reaching for the control panel. His hand moved at the same moment as hers, their fingers brushing across the smooth surface. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. Kyra didn't pull away immediately. For a heartbeat, maybe 2, their hands remained touching. Marcus turned to look at her and found those silver eyes locked on his, wide with something that looked almost like surprise. Or was it recognition? She withdrew her hand slowly. "Your protocols are adequate," she said, her voice slightly less sharp than before. "But I'll need to verify the atmospheric seals personally." As she moved around the lab, Marcus noticed the subtle changes, the way her initial stiffness had given way to something more fluid, how she asked questions with genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. When she leaned over a microscope to examine a sample, a strand of her dark hair fell forward, and Marcus found himself wondering what it would feel like between his fingers. "You're thorough," Kyra remarked, straightening. She met his eyes again, and this time there was no mistaking the intensity there. "More than I expected from a human." "Is that a compliment, Lieutenant?" The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Perhaps." "Don't let it go to your head." But when she left, she paused at the door and glanced back. Just for a moment, her expression softened into something almost vulnerable before she masked it again. "Be more careful in the corridors, Dr. Webb." Then she was gone. Marcus stood alone in his lab, his heart beating faster than it should, wondering what had just happened and why the empty space where she had stood felt so suddenly cold.
Summoned to her domain. The next day passed without incident, though Marcus found himself unconsciously listening for the sound of Kyra's footsteps in the corridor, watching for glimpses of her uniform through the lab's viewport. He told himself it was ridiculous. She'd made her opinion of humans abundantly clear. Yet he couldn't shake the memory of that moment when their hands had touched, the unexpected electricity that had passed between them. His console chimed just as he was preparing to leave for the evening. A message from Lieutenant Thess appeared on the screen. Report to my quarters. Section C, Room 47. Biological contamination detected in ventilation system. Your expertise required. Marcus read it twice, frowning. Biological contamination was usually handled by maintenance, not a xenobiologist. And why her personal quarters rather than filing a formal work order? 20 minutes later, he stood outside her door, equipment case in hand, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in his chest. The door opened before he could announce himself. Kyra's quarters were nothing like he'd expected. Where he'd imagined stark military efficiency, he found warmth. Soft lighting cast amber shadows across walls decorated with intricate tapestries from her homeworld. A low table held a collection of smooth stones arranged in careful patterns. The air carried a faint scent, something like jasmine mixed with rain. The ventilation control is there, Kyra said, gesturing to a panel near the ceiling. She'd changed from her uniform into something simpler, a dark tunic that made her seem less formidable, more accessible. Marcus set up his scanner, climbing onto a chair to reach the vent. What symptoms prompted the concern? An unusual smell, organic. She moved to stand below him, steadying the chair with one hand. I thought it might be contamination from the lab specimens. He ran the scanner along the vent seams, acutely conscious of her proximity. I'm not detecting any biological agents. The filters are clean, actually cleaner than standard. Are you certain? She stepped closer, looking up at him. Perhaps you should check more thoroughly. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw it clearly now. This wasn't about contamination. The realization made his pulse quicken. Lieutenant Thess, Kyra, she interrupted softly. When we're not in public, you can call me Kyra. He climbed down slowly, suddenly standing very close to her in the small space. Kyra, then. There's no contamination. Your ventilation system is functioning perfectly. I see. She didn't move away. Then perhaps I was mistaken about what I was detecting. Perhaps, Marcus echoed, his voice rough. She turned, putting a careful distance between them, and moved to the small seating area. Would you like tea? I realize I've wasted your time with a false alarm. It's the least I can offer. Marcus knew he should decline, should leave before whatever was building between them became impossible to ignore. Instead, he heard himself say, "Yes, thank you." Kyra prepared the tea with precise, graceful movements. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed again, and this time neither of them pretended not to notice. "Why did you really ask me here?" Marcus asked quietly. She settled on the cushioned seat across from him, wrapping both hands around her own cup. For a long moment, she stared into the steaming liquid. "Because yesterday, in your lab," she began, then stopped. "I've been on this station for 2 years, Dr. Webb." Marcus. "I've maintained perfect discipline, perfect distance. It's necessary in my position, expected of my people. And yesterday changed something. Yesterday I touched you and I felt..." She looked up at him, her silver eyes vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. "I felt something I've spent my entire career learning to suppress. Something I was taught was impossible between our species." "What did you teach to exactly?" Marcus asked. "That humans are too different, too impulsive, too emotional. that any attraction is merely curiosity, nothing substantial or lasting. She paused. But when I look at you, I don't see what I was taught to see. I see someone who treats my world's specimens with reverence, who apologized for an accident instead of making excuses, who looks at me like I'm not just a barrier to navigate. You're not, Marcus said firmly. You're fascinating, brilliant, and terrifying in the best way possible. A genuine smile finally broke across her face, transforming her features. Terrifying? You have no idea what it does to me when you walk into a room. The air grew charged. Kyra stood, moving to the viewport that showed the swirling storms of the gas giant below. Marcus joined her, standing close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "This is complicated," she whispered. "It doesn't have to be." She turned to face him, and he saw the war playing out in her expression. Duty against desire, conditioning against curiosity. "I asked you here because I needed to know if what I felt was real or just isolation playing tricks on me. If you felt it too." Marcus reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, marveling at the softness of her skin, the way her breath caught at the contact. "I feel it," he confirmed. "I've felt it since the moment we collided in that corridor." Kyra's eyes fluttered closed for just a moment, leaning almost imperceptibly into his touch. When she opened them again, they burned with intensity. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "My people were taught control from childhood. Emotions are acknowledged, but regulated. This feeling, it's overwhelming." "Then we'll figure it out together," Marcus said. "No expectations, no pressure, just honesty." She nodded slowly, and then did something that made his breath stop. She took his hand and pressed it fully against her cheek, holding it there with both of hers. "Stay a while longer," she whispered. "Talk with me. Help me understand what this is." So he stayed. They sat together as the station's artificial night cycle deepened, talking about their worlds, their fears, the loneliness that came with being so far from home. And with each shared confidence, each moment of vulnerability, the walls between them crumbled a little more.
The dance of boundaries. The following weeks transformed life on Helios 9 in subtle ways. Marcus and Kara developed an unspoken schedule. Accidental encounters in the commissary that weren't accidental at all. Joint inspections of areas that didn't strictly require both their expertise. Conversations that stretched long past their professional necessity. They were careful. Kara, especially, maintained her stern public persona, though Marcus learned to read the micro-expressions that others missed. The slight softening around her eyes when she saw him. The way her hand would pause near his on a console before pulling away. It was a delicate dance, thrilling and frustrating in equal measure. "Section 7 needs a biological survey," Kara mentioned one morning in the commissary, her voice carrying the same authoritative tone she used for everyone. The environmental sensors detected unusual readings. Marcus looked up from his breakfast, catching the meaningful glance she sent his way. "I can conduct that survey this evening after my shift. I'll provide security escort, 2,000 hours." Several crew members nearby took no notice of the exchange, but Marcus felt the anticipation already building. Section 7 was one of the older, less trafficked areas of the station, essentially an excuse to be alone. That evening, they met at the designated time. Kara led him through winding corridors to an observation deck that had been closed for repairs. Through the massive viewport, the gas giant dominated the view, its storm systems churning in mesmerizing patterns of orange and crimson. "There's nothing to survey here," Marcus observed, though he made no move to leave. "No," Kara agreed. She'd brought a thermal container.
But there's a view worth sharing. I thought you might appreciate it. They sat together on the deck floor, backs against the cold wall, sharing the spiced beverage she'd prepared. The warmth of the drink contrasted with the chill of the metal beneath them, creating a strange but pleasant duality. Tell me about your homeworld. Not the scientific facts, I've read those. Tell me what you miss. Marcus considered. Rain. Real rain, not recycled water from environmental systems. The sound it makes on windows. The smell of earth after a storm. My sister's laugh. She has this ridiculous snort when something really amuses her. He smiled at the memory. What about you? The singing gardens, Kara said softly. On my world, we have plants that produce harmonic vibrations at dawn. The whole city would wake to the symphony of living music. And the night markets, where artisans sell things they've crafted by hand, and everyone moves with purpose but without rushing. She paused. And my mother's disapproval, though I don't miss that part. Disapproval of what? Of me joining station security. She wanted me to follow the traditional path. Administrative work, an arranged union with someone from an appropriate family. She said I was too rigid, too closed off. Ironic, considering that's exactly what my training demanded. Marcus shifted closer. You're not closed off. Not with me. No, she agreed quietly. Not with you. That's what frightens me. Why does it frighten you? She turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the gas giant's turbulent light. Because I don't know how to control it, Marcus. Every time I see you, I want to touch you. When you're explaining your research, I find myself watching your mouth instead of listening to your words. At night, I lie awake thinking about... She stopped abruptly. Thinking about what? His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Kara set down her cup with deliberate care, thinking about what it would feel like, your hands on me, your mouth, how your skin would taste, whether the reality could possibly match the intensity of imagining it. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Marcus felt heat flood through him. Kara. But I can't, she continued, though her voice shook slightly. My position demands objectivity. If anyone discovered that I've developed feelings for a human under my jurisdiction, it would compromise everything. And you have your career to consider. Xenobiologists can't afford the complication of personal entanglements with station security. Marcus reached out, covering her hand. She didn't pull away. What if I said I don't care about complications? What if I told you that I think about you constantly, that I've memorized the way you take your tea, the small scar on your wrist, the exact tone your voice takes when you're trying not to smile? Her breath caught. What if I admitted that I dream about you, that I want to know everything, what makes you laugh without restraint, what you look like when you first wake, how you'd sound if you said my name without any barriers between us? Kara's free hand came up to touch his face, trembling slightly. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. We're from different worlds. Literally. I know that too. My people have strict protocols about interspecies relationships. There would be questions, evaluations, judgment.
when walls come down. Marcus waited the full 20 minutes, though every second felt like an eternity. He used the time to compose himself, to consider what was about to happen. This wasn't just attraction anymore. It was a threshold they were choosing to cross together, fully aware of the consequences. When he finally approached Section C, the corridor was indeed empty. Kyra's door opened at his touch, and he stepped into the warm amber lighting of her quarters. She stood by the viewport, still in her uniform, her posture rigid with tension that had nothing to do with discipline and everything to do with anticipation. When she turned to face him, he saw vulnerability and desire warring in her expression. "I almost messaged you to cancel," she admitted. 3 times. "Why didn't you?" "Because I'm tired of denying what I feel. Tired of pretending that rules matter more than this." She crossed the space between them, her movements less measured than usual, almost hesitant. "I've never done this, Marcus. Not with anyone from another world. I don't know the protocols, the appropriate—" He silenced her with a kiss, gentle but insistent. "There are no protocols here, just us." Kyra melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she deepened the kiss. Marcus let his fingers trail down her spine, feeling the shiver that ran through her at the contact. She made a soft sound against his mouth, surprise and pleasure mingled together. "Your touch," she breathed when they broke apart. "It's different than I imagined, more intense." "Different how?" She guided his hand to rest against her neck, where her pulse beat rapidly under his fingers. "My people are taught to maintain physical boundaries. Touch is reserved for family, for formal bonding ceremonies. But you, when you touch me, it's like every nerve awakens, like I've been half asleep my entire life." Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple, her cheek, the corner of her jaw. "Show me what you like. Teach me." Kyra's eyes darkened with desire. She took his hand and placed it over her heart, letting him feel its rapid rhythm. "Here. The sensation travels through my whole body when you touch here." He obliged, tracing gentle circles over the fabric of her uniform, feeling her breath hitch. His other hand found the small of her back, drawing her closer until no space remained between them. "And here?" he murmured against her ear. "Yes," Kyra gasped. "Everywhere, Marcus. I want to feel your hands everywhere." They moved together toward her sleeping area, a journey of mere steps that felt momentous. Kyra's fingers worked at the fastenings of her uniform with trembling hands until Marcus covered them with his own. "Let me," he said softly. He undressed her slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to each new expanse of skin revealed. Her violet-tinged complexion deepened with arousal, and he marveled at the beauty of her, the elegant lines of her body, the way she responded to his every touch with small gasps and sighs. When she stood before him, vulnerable and trusting, she reached for his clothes with more confidence. "My turn." They explored each other with wonder and growing passion, learning the maps of unfamiliar territory. Kyra traced the planes of his chest with curiosity, her touch sending sparks of pleasure through him. "Your skin is warmer than mine," she observed, her scientific mind still engaged, even in the midst of desire. "And your heartbeat, faster, more insistent." "That's just what you do to me," Marcus replied, pulling her down onto the bed. What followed was a revelation. The discovery that despite their different origins, their bodies understood a universal language. Kyra abandoned her carefully maintained control, letting herself be swept away by sensation. Marcus learned the sounds she made when pleasure overtook her, the way her fingers dug into his shoulders when he found particularly sensitive places. They moved together with increasing urgency, years of solitude and loneliness falling away in the heat of their connection. When Kyra cried out his name, her voice raw with ecstasy, Marcus felt something profound shift in his chest. This was more than physical release. This was recognition. Two souls finding completion in each other. Afterwards, they laid tangled together, skin cooling in the recycled air. Kyra rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to a more normal rhythm. Her fingers traced idle patterns across his skin. That was, she began, then trailed off. Yeah, Marcus agreed, understanding perfectly. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with unguarded affection. I didn't know it could be like that. The physical act, I understood the mechanics, but this feeling, like my entire being has expanded to include you, they never taught me about that. Marcus brushed a strand of hair back from her face. Maybe some things can't be taught, only experienced. I'm supposed to maintain professional distance, she said, though she made no move to separate from him. I'm supposed to be objective, impartial. But right now, in this moment, I can't remember why any of that mattered. Then don't remember. Just be here with me. They stayed like that for a long time, talking quietly about nothing and everything. Kyra told him about her first assignment, her nervousness and determination to prove herself. Marcus shared stories about his family, his decision to leave Earth, his hopes for his research. Between the words, they kissed. Slow, exploratory kisses that were about connection rather than urgency. What happens now? Kyra finally asked, voicing the question they'd both been avoiding. Marcus considered carefully. I suppose we decide what we want this to be. A single night? Something more? She met his eyes steadily. I know what I want. I want more nights like this. More mornings waking beside you. More conversations where I can be myself without the armor. She paused. But I don't know if that's possible given our circumstances. We make it possible, Marcus said firmly. We're careful in public, discreet about our relationship, but in private, we're honest. We don't hide from this. You make it sound achievable. Because it is. Kyra, I didn't come to Helios 9 to expect to find you. But now that I have, I'm not willing to give this up without trying. Are you? She kissed him by way of answer, pouring everything she felt into the connection. When she finally pulled back, her eyes shone with unshed tears. No, she whispered, I'm not willing to give you up. Whatever complications arise, we'll face them together. Together, Marcus echoed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Outside, the gas giant continued its eternal storm, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out on the station above. But inside Kyra's quarters, two people from different worlds had found something rare and precious, a connection that transcended origin, protocol, and expectation, and they were determined to protect it. A new orbit.